Good morning, Father's House. How we doing? It is good to be here. Let me just get, this fell. Hold on one second. We want to welcome all of our extension sites and the Greece campus. Welcome. We are so glad that you are with us. We have our Monroe extension, our Albion extension, our Life Center, downtown extension. We are just so glad that you are here. We have plenty of people joining us online today from New York, Arizona, Virginia, Florida, Maryland, Massachusetts, Connecticut, North Carolina, South Carolina, New Jersey, California, Texas, Georgia, Illinois. We also have people from South Africa, Quebec, Canada, Puerto Rico, and Israel, all joining us online. Now, the people from Israel are actually our pastors in a group of about 50 TFH family people who are over in Israel right now on an awesome trip. So welcome, guys. We are so glad that you're joining us this morning. I'm excited about this. We are, I think, week 3 of Heart Habits. And over the past couple weeks, Pastor Pierre and Pastor Carrie have been talking about the value of community. And we've been going over this number. This number is 1.7. That number represents the amount of times somebody comes to church in a given month. 1.7 times per month. That comes out to about 20.4 hours a year that someone is spending in church. Now, obviously, that means there's an exponentially larger amount of time being spent outside of church. And one of our goals as a church is to help engage people in what God is doing, not only here in these 4 walls, but all throughout the city and the region of Rochester. We want to help people get engaged with what's happening, because there's actually this thing called spiritual transformation. And when you and I choose Jesus, when we make the decision to follow Jesus, it's actually the most important decision that you can make. Saying yes to Jesus it doesn't get more important than that. Where there's a lack of hope, Jesus wants to bring you hope. Where there's a lack of peace in your life, Jesus wants to bring you peace. Where there's that empty void where you feel like something is significantly missing from my life, Jesus wants to fill that void. They've said we all have a God-shaped hole in our hearts, and God actually wants to invade your space this morning. But what comes with that decision are some other decisions that you and I have to make in regards to our spiritual well-being. One of those decisions is community. We cannot overemphasize how important it is to surround yourself with a group of people who are going to encourage you. They're going to support you when things in life are getting difficult. Nothing can replace a strong group of friends to help you get through it. When you want to celebrate great things that are happening in your lives, a community of people is actually extremely important to have around you. And the other area that we believe is just one of the most important decisions you can make is serving the church. Serving the church here and through our Hope Hub at all of our extension sites. Saying yes to serving can actually help galvanize the decision of following Jesus. And today we're going to talk about serving a little bit. We're going to talk about what it means to serve, why we serve, what Jesus thought about serving. So I'm excited about it, and we're going to get to it. I'm going to pray, and then we're going to go. God, we thank you that you are building your God dream here in Rochester. God, we thank you that we get to be a part of the great work of building your church. God, we appreciate everything you do for us. God, we thank you that heaven is open over our church this morning. God, and for every heart here, God, I pray that you be with us. You give us peace, but you would also convict our hearts to move in the way that you want us to move. In Jesus' name, amen. Awesome. Thanks, guys. All right. I'm going to put these to the side. So, you may have walked in this morning and you probably saw some people, and subconsciously or consciously, you're probably like, man, they spend a lot of time at the gym. You know, those people, you can just tell. Like, there's a couple people here that are just like so strong, and you're like, wow. Like, it's pretty obvious if you look at me. Maybe it's not, but I don't frequent a gym. I just don't, and I'm fine with it. Whatever. I've embraced it. But there's this thing. Like, I used to work out with some guys that I work with. Some of the guys here on staff. We would go and do this sadistic event called CrossFit. And it wasn't good. And so I would last about 10 to 15 minutes when we first started. And when I'm so out of shape, and I know I look slender, but it is not good. I would literally turn yellow like about 10 to 15 minutes in, literally like full jaundice just hits me. And the trainer comes up to me and he's like, Josh, this is about the time where we tell people to stop. And I would, and like, it wasn't good. Like, I would get super sick every single time we went. I'd have to sit in the lobby while everybody else is working out, and I just don't understand the whole thing. But if you looked at me, like, you would probably be like, well, he doesn't work out much, but he's definitely, like, he's in shape, because I hide it well. I like to call it, like, skinny fat. You know what I mean? Like, and you know, like, you have those people in your life. I'm one of them. Like, it's just skinny fat. Like, if I were to, like, run up the stairs at the church, I'm winded by the end of it. You know what I mean? Like, it's just like you're out of breath. You have to slow down a little bit and, like, catch yourself before you continue the conversation you were in. Like, I can't, I hide it well, but there's something about me that's just like, I'm skinny fat. I don't know what to tell you. I don't drink enough water, and it's something I'm trying to fix, but I've embraced it, you know? Like, I just don't. I drink a lot of coffee, and so what I'm trying to say is, I'm not the healthiest of individuals, but when you look at me, you can't really tell. And what's interesting is that as much as I can be skinny fat in my physique, I can also be skinny fat in my Christianity. You know what I mean? Like, I can be really good at looking the part, you know? Like, I'll show up early for church on Sunday. I'm going to make sure that I sit in the same seat, because then I know that I'm going to get noticed, because the regular thing, like, I got to sit in the same spot. I got my notepad and my pen out, not necessarily to take notes, just to make sure that they know that I've got it. So you have to have the notepad and the paper. And worship, I know exactly when to put my hands up in worship. And if you've been here long enough, you know you're like you know, like the bridge hits, the bridge builds. You know, the lights are gonna go right at the peak of the bridge. Boom, hands up. I'm in it. Like, I've got this thing. And like, but then what's crazy though is that Monday is coming. What's crazy is that Monday hits, and now my Monday through Saturday, there's no spiritual residue of what God did in my heart on Sunday. It's skinny, fat Christianity, where there's nothing holding me in my Monday through Saturday. There's no spiritual residue of what I went through on Sunday that is holding me throughout the week. We may look the part, but sometimes maybe there's something missing from our church experience. Because maybe that's all we have made it, is just another church experience. I think the thing that separates that life from the life that's impactful, from the life that is moving the God dream forward, from the life that is helping bring change to a city, is this thing called serving. I think spiritual transformation is very real. And I think one of the most important things that we can do as a church family is say yes to serving. So I want to read a scripture. It's Acts chapter 4, verse 13. It's about these guys named Peter and John. Peter and John were disciples of Jesus. Peter and John, right before what I'm about to read, they healed a paralyzed man. They preached this awesome sermon. A couple thousand people were added to the church. And this is what the religious leaders saw in Peter and John. It says, when they saw the courage of Peter and John and realized that they were unschooled and ordinary men, they were astonished, and they took note that these men had been with Jesus. Peter and John were unschooled and ordinary men. Now, I know some of us, we probably have more degrees than we have initials, but all of us are pretty ordinary people. We're just pretty ordinary. Like, when they saw Peter and John, what they saw, they didn't see guys who grew up in a synagogue. They didn't see guys who had memorized the first 5 books of the Bible like most teachers and rabbis of the day. They saw unschooled and ordinary people, and they were astonished at the impact they were having. So my question is, what happened to Peter and John? What did Peter and John go through that they could have this moment where people would look at them and say, I don't know what it is about them, but they've clearly been with Jesus? See, what is it about my life? What is it about your life that when people look at you, it's obvious that you have been with Jesus? And I think one of the things that separates Peter and John is that they said yes to building the God dream. I think they made their home in building the church. They didn't make their home. They said no long ago, before this moment. They said no to skinny fat Christianity, where they were just going to show up and enjoy the experience. But they gave their lives to building the God dream. And so here we are today. And I think what I want to do today is bring us to a story that I truly believe it created the glue that held all of Jesus' messages together for Peter and John. Now, the story I'm going to read, for the time they were in, it's extremely awkward. For the time they were in, what we're about to go through together, it did not happen. This is not normal. It shouldn't have happened probably the way that it happened. It was uncomfortable, but this was the moment where I believe that Peter and John said, we will never go back. We will never go another way. We will always give our lives to the mission of Jesus. And it is found in John chapter 13. And I'm just going to tell you the story, and then we're going to pick out a couple parts of it. But essentially, this is Jesus' last few hours on planet Earth. This is it. Now, the disciples aren't necessarily clear on the fact that this is it for Jesus, but Jesus has told them a couple times, and he knows. So they're sitting down for a meal, and again, it's their last dinner that they're going to have together. So it's a pretty important meal. And during the dinner, they start arguing about who's the favorite or the greatest disciple, which is a bizarre argument to be having. But they're having the argument, and Jesus gets fed up with it, okay? Basically tells them to quiet down. None of you all that important. And he stands up in the middle of dinner, which, again, they're laying down at tables. They don't have chairs. They're laying down. It's an awkward moment. You don't stand during dinner. He stands up, and then he starts taking off his, outer clothing. Now it's really awkward. And then it gets even worse, and we're going to explain why, but he grabs a bowl and a rag, and he starts washing the disciples' feet. Even in today's world, that would be disgusting. Okay, first of all, there's food around. What are we doing? We're eating. Get away. But it was even worse, and what was happening was even more insane. And we're going to explain it in a minute. But then he gets to Peter, and Peter, he's like, "Listen, Jesus, you're not touching my feet." And Jesus looks at him and says, "Pete, if you don't let me do this, you have no part in what I'm doing here." So Peter's like, "Okay, well then give me a bath." The only way that Peter could, he goes to the other extreme. He's like, "Okay, well just then bathe me." And Jesus is like, "Listen, Peter, slow down. You don't need a bath. I'm gonna wash your feet." And then every single disciple, Jesus washes their feet, and then he goes, and at the end he says, "Listen, now you've seen me do this. Now I want you to go and do this for other people." See, so here's the deal. If you want to become more like Jesus, you need to build your serving muscles. If you want to become more like Jesus, you need to build your serving muscles. So today I've got 3 lessons that I think Peter and John took from this experience. Now there was a couple moments after all of this where Peter had some rocky stuff go on, but again, I think that this moment galvanized everything for these guys. The first lesson that they learned was that Jesus was confident in his calling. Now in John, in the first couple verses, it says this. It says, Jesus knew that the hour had come for him to leave this world and go to the Father. Having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end. Or in other translations, it says he showed them the full extent of his love. Then it says in verse 3, Jesus knew that the Father had put all things under his power, that he had come from God and was returning to God. So he got up from the meal, he took off his outer clothing, and wrapped a towel around his waist. Now, Jesus was confident in his calling, or another way to say it is he was confident in where God had him right now. He was confident. Now, when we talk about confidence, I think the one day that we are the most confident that we could ever be is, if you're married, your wedding day. Your wedding day is just there is nothing quite we've made this so bizarre. So if you're a woman in the place and you're engaged, in a couple months, you're going to have your wedding day where literally you can get anything you want. Okay? You're going to have people that do your hair. They're going to make you they're going to do your makeup. You're paying people to do things that you never pay people to normally do, but it's your wedding day. Guys, you're going to wake up, if it's an afternoon wedding, you wake up whenever you want. All your boys are there. They're cooking you breakfast. And you're going to put a tux on, and we don't get tux normally. We don't do tuxedos. But you'll put a tuxedo on, and everybody is there for you. If there's any day to be confident, it's your wedding day. There's very few things that could happen on your wedding day that would make you lose your confidence. You're going to look prettier and more handsome than you've ever looked in your life. You literally paid thousands of dollars to have someone take pictures of you. This is the culmination of confidence is the wedding day. It's super easy to be confident when everything is going well, right? Confidence is easy. Now this story is Jesus' last meal. In a few hours, he's going to die a fairly brutal death at the hands of people who literally hate him. Like this is like if there's any day where you're like, this should really needs to be about me, it'd be if you knew that in a few hours what's going to happen to Jesus was going to happen to you. So like if we were to write the story and we were to be like, listen, this is Jesus' last meal, so we got his closest friends together and they started to talk about all the good times. We wouldn't think twice. We'd be like, that makes sense. Like, you know it's your last meal. Let's talk about the good times. Like, could you imagine that, like it wouldn't be abnormal if Jesus was like, guys, like I just need some positive energy right now. Like, guys, I just need you to encourage me a little bit. I'm a little stressed out. I'm feeling a little discouraged. Like, Peter, can you please recount the story of the loaves and the fishes again? Like, I'm struggling to, like, keep a smile on my face. I need to have the good times. Like, that would be kind of like the normal response if you knew that you were about to die. Like, confidence wouldn't be easy. But for some reason, Jesus was able to find himself confident even in a really tough situation. And I think the reason why is because Jesus understood his purpose far more than he understood what he might be passionate about in the moment. I think Jesus understood his purpose. See, Jesus wasn't necessarily living in the dream world of his imagination, hoping for what's best. And I wonder, how often do I shift from my right now into my dream world depending on the situation that I found myself in? You see, so what's interesting is that we all have dreams, we all have things we're passionate about, and that's great, we should have them. The problem is, dreams are pretty elusive. You know what I mean? Like, dreams are, they're elusive, and they tend to kind of be very comfortable. Like, dreams are always comfortable. In fact, when a dream isn't comfortable, we call that a nightmare, and like we try to avoid those. But dreams are always comfortable. They tend to be by nature a little ambiguous. It's hard to put languages around our dreams, but they're always comfortable. Dreams are always birthed out of the idealized picture of our future. And the problem is, when we chase our elusive dreams, it might be clouding what's in front of us right now. See, the busier we get chasing our dreams, it might actually be clouding the impact that we can have right now. You see, if you want to live a life of impact, you need to be confident in where God has you right now. Despite what's going on, despite what you're going through, it's learning to find the godly confidence in the current season you're in so that you can live a life of impact. And one of the things that serving does, it unlocks your ability to live a life of impact in the right now. I believe God has you in a season that you're in right now for a purpose. I believe God has given you purpose in whatever season you found yourself in. And the key to unlock the impact that God wants you to have is to find confidence in the right now. And I think Peter and John, they learned that day that Jesus was very confident despite what he was going through. The second lesson that Peter and John learned from Jesus that day is that Jesus was willing to break cultural norms. He was willing to break cultural norms for the sake of serving other people. See, in John chapter 13, verse 5, it says this. It says, after he wrapped a towel around his waist, he poured water into a basin and began to wash the disciples' feet, drying them with a towel that was wrapped around him. Now, again, we can easily just read this, move on, get to chapter 14, let's get to the good stuff, come on. But there's a couple things you need to know about foot washing in this culture. Like, you see, if you think about first century Middle Eastern culture, like, first of all, pavement wasn't a thing, okay? And cars weren't a thing. So animal travel was the norm. Dirt roads and dusty roads was the norm. Now, the animals, I don't think they had it invented, the nice Macy's Day Parade bags that they put on the back of horses to keep the streets clean. That wasn't there. So, like, everything was just happening on the street, okay? So when you would go house to house, village to village, walking and traveling, your feet were, like, disgustingly dirty. Like, it was, like, horribly dirty. So the common practice was when you arrive at somebody's home, there would be a slave in the house whose job, it was the lowest job, was to wash feet of the visitors who were coming to the house that day. Now, this society was so oppressive to people that in the Jewish culture, they wouldn't even allow a Jewish slave to be this person because the job was too disgusting. A Gentile slave had to take the position of the foot-washing slave, okay? And so it was the most oppressive job that one could have. Now, Jesus and his disciples, they moved around so much, they didn't know where they were going to be staying the next night. They were very nomadic people going from town to town. They frequently would end up at homes that didn't have this person. So you could probably assume the argument that Peter and John and the rest of the disciples were having about who's the greatest was really a conversation about who's going to be the one to wash the feet tonight. Like, who's going to be the guy? And so Jesus, in the midst of this like ridiculous conversation, Jesus stands up to start washing feet. Now again, you got to put in your mind who Jesus is to these people. See, for these people, Jesus isn't just their teacher. Like, Jesus is literally God. Like, he is the Messiah. He is the Son. Peter says, you are the Son of the living God. You are the one who came to establish your rule and reign on the earth. And now this guy is standing up to do the work of a slave. He's breaking cultural, comfortable norms for the sake of serving other people. And what's interesting is that comfort is a pretty universal concept. Like, it's very comfortable to worry about myself. Like, it's very comfortable to, kind of serve myself first. It's very comfortable to just kind of reserve the best for what I deem most important. Like, that's comfortable. But Jesus spent his time breaking cultural norms for the sake of serving other people. So our question today is, are you willing to break cultural norms for the sake of building the God dream? Are you willing to do what might not be culturally normal for the sake of building the God dream? Now, here we live in a city where they say the research shows that about 8% of our population will agree to volunteer at a nonprofit organization. 8%. It is not culturally normal to volunteer at a nonprofit organization. Now, what's interesting is that the church isn't just some nonprofit organization. See, the message that we are carrying is literally the message that can change the world. The message that we are carrying is literally the thing that should wake you up in the morning and say, I have to build the God dream today. We actually believe that we are carrying a message that can take people from dark places into light places. We actually believe that we're carrying a message that can take broken marriages and help them find reconciliation. We believe that we are delivering a message that can take people who are suffering with addiction and bring them to freedom. We believe a life-giving and life-changing message. This isn't just some nonprofit organization. This is the church. And the church is the vehicle that God is using to spread the gospel to every corner of this globe. And Rochester is no different. So the question is, are you willing to break cultural norms for the sake of building the God dream right here in Syracuse? Are you willing to break cultural norms for the sake of building the God dream at the Albion Extension? Are you willing? Did I say? I'm sorry. That's bizarre. Rochester. Anyway, that is so weird. So yeah, apparently we're all ready because you're all listening, so that's great. Excellent. The third lesson that Peter and John learned was that Jesus displayed contentment through serving. Now this is huge because I'm an Enneagram 7. If you don't know what the Enneagram is, you just need to Google personality test with numbers and you'll find it, okay? And it's a big deal. It's not a horoscope, it's a personality test, so don't freak out. But I'm a 7. And that's just a profile of a person who loves to party, okay? I just do. Like, show me where a party is, and if I'm not there, I'm offended. That's like how I'm wired, okay? When I got married to my wife 7 years ago, and we instantly had like 30 people at our house. She's like, "What are you doing?" And I was like, "Just being me, babe. Let's party." And she's the opposite. She's more like, "Can we just be us?" I'm like, "Yeah, sure." Like for a couple minutes. And but the Enneagram 7 is like obsessed with what's next. And what you find with Jesus is that Jesus did not seem to be a man who was obsessed with what's next. Like, he didn't seem to be a man who was concerning himself with what other people would deem as, this is better for you. You see, if we were in that story that day, maybe you'd like put your hand on his shoulder and say, Jesus, you need to like slow down. Like, dude, there's a better way to get this point across. You don't actually have to do it. But Jesus was not concerned with what others would deem as what's better. Jesus was able to create space in his life and pause. And inside the pause, you find contentment. You find someone who had the ability to say yes to things that other people just weren't saying yes to. He was able to remove the ridiculous conversations that some may have in their minds about why this might not be the best thing. He was able to create enough space to be able to create a pause and say, I'm just going to say yes to building the God dream. I'm just going to say yes to this thing. And what's interesting is that lesson 1 and lesson 2, the fact that Jesus was confident, the fact that he was willing to break cultural norms, the only reason he was able to do those things is because he was a man of contentment. You see, the discontented heart will always worry about tomorrow. A discontent heart will always worry about the next best thing. A discontented heart is always going to worry about this might not be the opportunity for me. And this is why Jesus even said, don't worry about tomorrow. Tomorrow has enough trouble of its own. Find yourself in today. Can you find contentment in today? Can you find contentment in the midst of the dark season you might find yourself in right now? Can you find contentment now? Because here's the reality. If you can't find contentment now, you're never going to be able to withstand the challenges and the trials that are coming tomorrow. Which is why he said what he said in the first place. And what we end up doing is we're borrowing worry. We're borrowing problems from tomorrow and compounding our worry today. And the result is never peace. And you will not be able to build the God dream if you do not have peace. You see, your lack of contentment is actually causing you not to be able to build the God dream in your family. A lack of contentment is causing you not to be able to build a God dream in your marriage. It's causing you not to be able to build a God dream in your job and your workplace. Until you find the art of gratitude and being thankful for what you have and being grateful for the place where God has you, only then will you be able to say, I've created space, I'm content. I have the peace that passes all understanding that is guarding my heart and mind. It is in that space where when you say yes to serving, I believe that the blessings of heaven will open over your life. I actually believe that you will find yourself with more peace when you say yes to things like partnering with the God dream. If a Naji can come out, that would be great if a Naji's out. What Peter and John, so after this dinner, things didn't actually get easier for Peter and John and the rest of the disciples. It actually got a lot more confusing. So a couple hours after this, Judas, he had already betrayed Jesus. He already had the plan in motion. And the Roman soldiers come and they arrest Jesus. Now this is confusing. And then it gets even worse. They're not just going to throw him in jail. They actually start beating up the guy that they viewed as Lord. And then a couple hours after that, now he's getting nailed to a cross. He's brutally dying a death. They were not ready for this. Things didn't get easier, but something happened at that dinner that never left them. Something happened at that dinner where all throughout the book of Acts, it says that the disciples, the apostles, they got together, they broke bread in each other's homes, they shared communion together. That all started because of that supper. What happened in that room on that night when Jesus chose serving over what was culturally normal, it changed the trajectory of Peter and John's life forever. Never again would they be the same after that dinner. They would always make their home not in comfort. They didn't make their home in what was comfortable. They made their home. They found themselves at home in building the God dream. So tonight, or to this morning, our question that we have to ask ourselves is, are we making our home in what's comfortable? Have we found ourselves at home just with a good church experience? Have we made our home here? And you know what's interesting about making yourself comfortable and making yourself at home? We don't recline at tables anymore, right? We have chairs, thank God we have chairs. But there's a couple other tells that we have when we're home somewhere. So when I go home, I make myself at home by I take my shoes off. I take my shoes off. Maybe I go to the fridge, see if there's any good snacks. I make myself at home, at my home. When I go to my parents' house, I make myself at home. I take my shoes off. I sit on the couch, and I'm at home. If I come to your house and I don't take my shoes off, it's probably because I don't feel at home. And maybe you're the same way. Like you keep your shoes on because then you can leave at any moment. You don't have to pause the door. You're gone. Like I can just go. I don't need to wait. Like you keep your shoes on. And I wear weird socks. People make fun of me. So I just keep my shoes on if I'm not feeling at home. What's interesting is that maybe you feel like your life has come to a place where you have nothing left to give. So you've taken your shoes off. You come to church and you just, you're putting the God dream on the shelf for a little bit. You decide, you know what, I don't know if I have anything left to give. I'm gonna take my shoes off and I'm gonna enjoy the ride this morning. I'm just gonna enjoy it. Maybe you feel like you're waiting for your next open door, your next big season, your next big opportunity. So in the here, in the right now, you've taken your shoes off. You've put the God dream on the shelf. Maybe you've got another thing on your heart and I'm not gonna engage in this season right now. You're actually missing out on what it means to make an impact right where you're at. Maybe you feel like you've lost your purpose. You've tried things and you failed. You tried that business and it didn't work out. You tried that relationship and it didn't work out. And now you feel like you've lost your purpose. You're kind of spinning your wheels. You're trying to figure it all out. You come on Sunday and I'm just going to take my shoes off today. I'm going to put the God dream on the shelf. See, like I said, your shoes actually communicate something about you. Shoes, my shoes mean I'm active. When you have your shoes on, you're active. Shoes mean that you're going somewhere. Shoes mean that you're gonna be here for a minute, but you've got something you got to do, so you can't stay long. I got to go do something. You see, shoes mean that I'm ready to build something. If you're a contractor, shoes mean that you're on the work site, you are ready to build. You can't show up to a construction site without boots on, right? Your shoes mean that you're ready to do something. Shoes, they mean that you're ready to climb a mountain. That means you're ready to take on a hill. Shoes communicate action. They just do. So my question is, what would happen to our communities? What would happen to our cities if we decided we were going to be a church that no matter what happened, we would never take our shoes off? No matter what happened, the God dream of building the church would always be our focus. What would happen if the season you found yourself in wasn't good, but you looked at it and you said, you know what, I don't totally understand it. I'm not where I thought I was going to be. I'm not doing what I thought I was going to do, but God must have a purpose for me here. I'm going to do everything I can to engage. I'm going to do everything I can to build the God dream. Maybe you look at your family and your marriage is at a point where you're totally confused about what direction to go. It's not working out. You're finding yourself fighting. What would happen if you and your wife sat down today and you said, you know what, we're going to have to figure this thing out. But what we cannot do is take our shoes off. What we cannot do is sit idly around while things just happen. We are going to engage the God dream, not only for our family, not only for our marriage, but for our city. God has us here for a purpose. You know what's amazing is that when God viewed all of eternity and he looked at the timeline, he said, in 2020, here's what I want. I want this group of people right here. There is a reason why you find yourself sitting here today. There's actually a reason why you have the story that you have. And the city, our community, it desperately needs people who are willing to keep their shoes on and engage the God dream here in Rochester. So our question for you today is, are you willing to put your shoes back on? Because maybe you have found yourself in a season where they've been off for a long time. Maybe you've been coming here for years. You've been sitting in the same spot. You're not engaged on a team. You're not engaged at one of our extension sites. You're not actively building the God dream. We want to give you an opportunity because we believe that when God has a dream, he builds the church. And again, if we were to sit down together and talk through how would we do this? I mean, we literally are serving the God who flung the stars into the galaxies. We're serving the God who created water. This guy is a genius. And so if we were at a planning table with this guy and he was like, listen, here's what we're going to do. We are going to start a movement called the church, and we're actually going to spread the gospel to a lost and dying world. How do you think we should do it? I don't think any of us would have stood up and said, hey, I got an idea. Let's just use people. No, you would have thought through okay, we're broken. We don't have it all together. We usually misspeak. we're dealing with a lot of baggage. Like, it doesn't seem like a sustainable way to build the church. But when God viewed the church, he wanted to build it with people who are broken. You realize that God specializes in damaged goods. You realize when God views the church, he picks people who don't have it all together. He picks people who tend to misspeak. He picks people who other people might look over, and he says, I want you to build the God dream. This is why Peter got the job in the first place. Peter wasn't a synagogue guy. He wasn't hanging out at church. He was a fisherman. And God walked up to the boat one day and said, hey, I want you to follow me. See, the church thrives when construction workers, when accountants, when doctors, when garbage men, when stay-at-home moms, when single adults and married adults and retired people come together and say, you know what? God is doing something here, and I have to be a part of it. God is doing something here, and I have to keep my shoes on. So when you walked in today, you received this name tag. This is actually the name tag that all of our volunteers wear. There's just never a form on the other side. It's usually double-sided. But we wanted to give you one of these today as a sign that we want you to help us build the God dream here in Rochester. We want people that are right in this room, at all of our extension site, at our Greece campus, we want you to sign up for things like the Hope Hub. We believe that God is doing a work at the Albion Extension through the Women's Penitentiary. And we want you to be a part of it. We believe that there's people in here who have giftings, they have abilities that the church, that God desperately needs to bring the gospel to places that we had no idea we could go. God wants to build his dream, and he needs us to do it. So right after this service, here's what's going to go down. We have this thing called Growth Track, and I got a story for you that I want you to see. I don't want to steal his thunder, but one of my friends, his name is Evan. Now, Evan came to church here a few months ago, and him and his girlfriend, they signed up for a serve team. They barely knew what they were getting themselves into, but Evan's story is a perfect example of someone, despite what he was going through, said yes to building the God dream. Let's check out this video.
My name is Evan Hickernell, and I have been attending the Father's House here for about 4 months now. Growth Track really opened up my eyes on what's available here at the Father's House. There's so many avenues that you can go down. The very first time that I was able to serve here at the Father's House, I was able to open up and invite people in. The Father's House is a great place to put yourself in an uncomfortable position. When you get yourself into a situation where you feel like, ooh, you're gonna learn something about yourself, and that's growth. Growth, that's the word in Growth Track. I think probably the main thing I learned from Growth Track was there's a spot for everyone. And it's a goal and a mission of the Father's House to find that for each person that has the desire to serve. I found a sense of belonging. I know where I'm supposed to be. I know where God wants me to be. Right here at the Father's House, and serving and giving back to what he so freely gave to me.
Come on, that's so awesome. And what's really amazing about Evan's story is that Evan's story is not an isolated incident here at the church. There's been decades of the Father's House, lives and volunteers of people who have said yes to building the God dream. People who are going through all sorts of things in their life, but have still said yes to building the God dream. And so today what we're going to do is we're going to give you an opportunity to say yes. We're actually going to do what we would call week 1 of Growth Track. We're actually going to do it right here in the auditorium after service. And if you're here and maybe you're with your family, maybe you're a single adult and you're like, I need to do something with this God dream. We're going to meet right here in this center section after church. You can bring this name tag. It's going to be how we know that you came. And we just want to see a church, a community of people who say yes to building the God dream. So I'm going to pray, and then we're going to start the welcome party literally 1 minute after service. So God, we thank you that you have called us to do great things. God, we thank you that you have called us to build your dream here in Rochester. God, we thank you that despite what we're going through, we can have confidence in where we're at right now. That despite what we're going through, God, that we can break cultural norms by serving other people. God, I pray that we would be a church full of content people, people who say yes to building your dream. And God, for each and every person in this room, God, I pray that the peace that passes all understanding would guard their hearts and minds. Those who feel like they lost their purpose, God, I pray that in this moment, you would help them find that purpose again. We thank you for it in Jesus' name. Amen.